Welcome to the Trailblazer Talks podcast. I'm your host, Courtney Hope Wilson. The heart behind this podcast is to encourage and equip you to discover your God-given purpose by sharing talks with people blazing trails right where they are. Each week, you'll hear from me and different guests on the show to talk about life, purpose, God, leadership, and a whole lot in between. I love having conversations with people, and I'm excited to get to bring you into those. My hope is that you'll grow and become poised for purpose. I hope each week that you'll feel more equipped to be a trailblazer right where you are. So let's get into this week's episode. Hey friends, welcome back to this week's episode. I'm excited to share this conversation with you because it's with my new friend, Joe Delagrave. He's a husband, father, elite athlete, and keynote speaker, and he loves to spread his story about his journey from college football player to life in a wheelchair to elite athlete. Joe has become one of the best wheelchair rugby players in the world. He's in his 12th year playing for the U.S. wheelchair rugby national team, and he's been named Athlete of the Year twice for the U.S. QRA, winning an award in 2012 and 2015, and he's actually headed back to Tokyo for the Olympics this year. I know today's story from tragedy to triumph is going to encourage you to have a victor mindset no matter what life throws at you. Get ready because this episode is sure to inspire you. So let's hop on into this week's conversation. Joe, thank you so much for being on the show today. I'm excited to have this conversation with you and just have the listeners hear more about your story. I'm excited to hear more about your story. We connected on the Clubhouse app, and it's been so fun just to get to know people through there. So I'd love for you just to tell the listeners who you are, a little bit about yourself and all of that so they can get to know you.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, Courtney, thank you so much for having me on the show and the opportunity to be speaking with your audience and talking with you. And Clubhouse is a funny deal where you meet people and get to connect, and it's great. And so thank you for that. And my name's Joe. I'm a wheelchair rugby player, a bronze medalist in 2012. I've been playing wheelchair rugby for 13 years in the national team. And then I also speak to people about overcoming their obstacles and this idea of permanent victory, where our identity is kind of wrapped up in different things, but then we can make the choice to choose our victory. For me, that's in Jesus first and foremost. And then being able to just choose whether to play that victim card or the victor card. There's a lot of things that go on in life that we don't get control of. And so really just hopefully get to chat about that today. But that's what I do besides obviously being a husband and a dad. So those are the other hats I get to wear with my 3 kids and my wife, April. So that's me in 15 seconds. Boom.
I know you have such an incredible story. When I was learning more about it, I was just blown away by just how you overcame and all of that and making the best of such a life-altering situation. And I'd love just to hear more about that part of your story of going from college football player to getting paralyzed in a boating accident and just how that kind of pivoted everything for you. Yeah.
I grew up an athlete, loving sports, loving to be part of a team, did plays and musicals. My secret deal is singing. And so I love to sing. I'm really great in the shower and in the car type of deal. But no, I love plays and musicals too, just to be part of a team, part of something that's bigger than yourself, trying to fit in wherever the best fit is for you and finding out which piece of the puzzle you are. And so that was like the goal is to get into college, and was able to do that and play football at a Division II school called Winona State. Go Warriors! And so life was great. And then all of a sudden it came to a screeching halt when I was 19. I ended up in a boating accident where I was just sitting there as a beautiful summer day in Wisconsin on the Mississippi River, 75 degrees and partly cloudy and a great day. And my buddy Kyle ended up hitting the bottom of the river. I flew backwards, hit my head on the front of the boat, inside the boat, and snapped my neck at the C6 and 7 level, 6 and 7 vertebrae down from the base of your skull. So in a split second, I went from 6'6", 260 pounds football player to paralyzed. And in that moment, it's, I have no idea that it's as big of a situation as it is. I'm thinking broken bone, like I'll be back on the football field soon. And obviously that wasn't the case. And so to get through some of that, there was just some really crazy God moments that happened. And one of those is my life verse. Everyone says, oh, they got a life verse. Like this one was literally given to me a week before my accident on July 3rd, 2004. I had a Don Beebe House of Speed Speed shirt, and he's an old football player that played in the 90s for the Buffalo Bills and Green Bay Packers. And this shirt had been given to me in my freshman year of college by our kicker. And he was trying to make fun of me because I forgot my shirt underneath my pads. I was asking around. And so the kicker's making fun of me. I'm like, I'm a freshman. So I'm like, just give me the shirt, whatever. Put it on. And I was like, I'm keeping this bad boy because he's making fun of me, like whatever. So I'll keep it. So I wore it a week before my accident, and camp counselor, I was doing a basketball clinic with some guys and was like, hey, what's that verse on your shirt? And I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I didn't realize there was a verse on there at that point in my faith journey. As my athletic career in college was rising, my relationship with Jesus was kind of going the wrong way. And he's like, Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. And I was like, what does it say? And he's like, trust the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding in all your ways. Acknowledge him and he'll direct your paths. And I was like, wow, that's neat. And like most people like have it on their coffee table or whatever, like in their home, like it's a coffee mug verse or whatever. But it just kind of stuck with me. And then a week later, I break my neck and I'm thinking about that verse a couple of days after my accident and kind of angry about the situation. I'm like, trust in the Lord. Like, no way. I want to know what's going on. I'm 19. My athletic identity is ripped away. I have no idea what I want to do or who I'm going to be sitting in a wheelchair. Like, what is going on? And so that was kind of like the deal there at 19. I'm thinking like, what happens next? Like, what is going to happen with my life? And I think we all have moments, maybe not breaking your neck, but moments where we're kind of asking God, like, what's next? Like, what do you have for me? I don't see a way through this, but at some point I got to believe that you've got a plan for my life.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I know that people go through all kinds of life altering things, and whether it is like breaking your neck or, losing anything in life. And I just can't imagine, that would be so difficult to have to overcome. And trusting God, like it's easy to say, oh, I trust God and like everything's great in life. But whenever something drastic happens and you truly have to trust God, that's just like, okay, do I really trust you? And something as big as identity, that's something that I think most people struggle with, whether it's just figuring out, as a high school student, like what's next, going to college, what is that going to look like? And I know for many of my friends who have, done athletics, that has been a huge part of their identity. So how, after your accident, how did that kind of going through that, how did that affect your identity of having to be like, okay, wow, I was this college football player, and then growing in that to kind of rediscover who God created you to be and that overall identity of like who you are in Christ? Yeah.
Great question. It took about 15 seconds. No, I'm kidding. It didn't. It was like, it's a process. It really is. And I remember my sisters had wrote that verse on my wall in the hospital. I remember waking up and seeing it and again, just being angry about it. And you go through this period where you have all these questions swirling around in your head going, am I going to find a job that I love or passionate about stuff? Or is this girl I'm with going to stay with me? And am I going to be able to have kids? Like, what's that all look like? How do you figure out stuff in a wheelchair or take care of yourself? Like, what's that look like? And so that was the first question. But then as like stuff started to kind of unravel and you can see the path forward, and it was going to be in a wheelchair, and what's that look like? And it takes a year, 2 years to really understand who you are. But first I had to figure out whose I was. And a lot of times we're looking for identity in a job. We're looking for identity in a relationship or with a different hat that you wear, depending on what you do. And, for me, that was being an athlete. But I really had to go like, God, I do trust in your plan. And that took some time. And I still think, keeping it real, there's days you have terrible days and you're going like, I can't see a way through, but then you choose to say, yeah, I have faith. Yeah. Because look at the times before where you came through. I have faith. And that's the beautiful thing about God is he's going to show you the past and go, I've helped you out before. I'm going to do it again and again and again. And so having that faith. And so that was the first step with that. And the beautiful thing about it is scripture says, delight yourself in the Lord and he'll give you the desires of your heart. Have your identity in him. He knows who you are. He made you. He knows your talents, your gifts, your passions. He knows your purpose. And so understanding that, I knew, man, I'm an athlete. Like I like, that's part of me. That's part of my passions. And, a couple of years later, end up playing wheelchair rugby. And I was like, wow, like this is bigger than anything I ever imagined, being able to wear USA across my chest and travel the world playing a sport, this crazy sport where crippled people chase each other around and try to hurt each other. It's bizarre. It's a wild deal, but it's a beautiful sport, and to be able to have that. And so it was first putting my identity in Jesus. Second, like, okay, I still have those talents, those gifts, even though physically I'm in a wheelchair now.
Mm-hmm. I think that's awesome that, it's not just that clean answer of just like, oh, I woke up one day and I realized my identity in Christ. Like I think the beauty is the journey of walking through that and growing closer to God and being able to, encourage others with that, because I think so many people can look at other people's lives and be like, oh, well, they got through it because they're XYZ and like they're just closer to God than me or whatever. But the thing is, like, we all struggle with that and we all face different lies, whether you've been following Jesus for 5 seconds or 5 years or 20 years, we all kind of go through those mentalities over time. So I think that is awesome that you were able to work through that and also just encourage others with that where you are now. And I would love to hear more about how you pivoted with your athletic giftings of changing to wheelchair rugby and kind of what that looked like, and then joining like the Paralympics. Like that's huge and so cool. So what was that experience like, and how has God used that experience of kind of changing, going from football to rugby?
Yeah. It was a long process too. And I love that you said about, stuff is a process. Stuff, it does get messy. It's not clean. Let's be real. Let's be real. So the world can see us as being real and authentic as well. And for me, I'm going to keep it 100. Like, I thought wheelchair sports were stupid. I thought they were pathetic. I thought, like, I was so ignorant. I was thinking, like, I don't want to hug. Like, I was an athlete. Like, I was a football player. Like, I played in college. Like, there's no way. And slowly, my heart softened to that. And my buddy, and I really think it's important to have people around you that are going to build you up when you need it, and also pull you back when you need it. And my buddy was like, man, and he was really nice about it, really loving about it. But he's like, you're getting fat. Like, you're getting out of shape. You're not going to be able to push your wheelchair around. You need to start working out. And we ended up going, and we went to the hospital to weigh me, and it said 283 pounds. And I'm like, your bed's broken. Like, we need to figure out a different thing to weigh me. And we weighed again, and it wasn't broken. It was like me that needed to work out. So like a year and a half after my accident is when I was looking up wheelchair sports before. So I literally went to Google, jumped on that bad boy, and typed in wheelchair sports and tried to find something that I thought I would like. Wheelchair racing's not one of those. I know a lot of people are like, when I'm in airports, they're always going, hey, are you racing? And I'm like, you don't just randomly go up to people and ask them if they're a race. Like, I would never do that to someone who's walking, right? Like,
you should just ask back, are you also racing?
Yeah. Like, what? So, and I was like, I never liked running before. I'm not going to like running now. Like then, and let's look at something else. And wheelchair rugby used to be called murder ball. And I looked at a video and I'm like, wow, this is awesome. Like, these people are crazy. I want to sign up for this. It was full contact and looked really neat. And so I ended up clicking on that and then finding a team close by me. I was living in, going back to school in Winona, Minnesota. And then the closest team was 2.5 hours away in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And so I drove up there, went to a practice. The guys had me get in a chair and play with them. And it was such a beautiful thing. Probably a year and a half, 2 years after my accident, maybe a little over 2 years. And 30 minutes into practice, my lungs are filling with air. I'm getting hot. You're getting those competitive juices going. And I'm like, wow, I'm an athlete again. Like, I can play this sport. I was terrible. Balls were flying all over the place. And I was like barely making it up down the court, but I was an athlete again. And it was just such a special moment where I thought that was completely gone. And here I am being able to play a sport again, and slowly not slowly, fast. It was fast. Like that first practice, I was like, I want to come back every time they have practice, and really enjoyed it. And just a neat thing to be able to do. And then from there, fell in love with it, realized it was a Paralympic sport, started setting goals, started losing weight, was able to make some national teams, and the rest is history from there. But it was that first moment where I realized, wow, I can be an athlete again. And then the athletic switch turned on, and being able to start setting goals, and life completely changed because of the blessing of rugby with that. I think I got a lot of confidence and health back from being able to play this sport.
That's so cool. And I mean, rugby, I'm not like the most sport oriented person, but I know rugby is similar to football in just how contact it is and just the way that the layout of the game, right? So it's kind of neat that you went from like American football to like rugby and still got to use like those gifts and talents that God gifted you with and that you were born with. So I think that's really neat too.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And what encouragement would you give to others who maybe have walked through their own life-altering change, whether it's similar to your story or maybe it's just something else like a major relationship or life change that came unexpectedly? And how can they find encouragement to see God's goodness in those hard moments?
Yeah. There's a couple things that come to mind. Number one for me is to not push people away. I think it's easy when we go through really hard times and we got to be vulnerable and we're like, ooh, I'm going to push this person away because I'm feeling emotional right now. I don't want to see them. I don't want them to see me cry, or I don't want them to see me go through something where, I'm still trying to figure it out. But having those people around you, for me, that was my wife. She was my girlfriend at the time. We ended up going through this together, ended up getting married and having 3 beautiful babies. And she was one of the just rocks of my time through this deal where, loved ones can go through it. I had my football teammates, my family, close friends. So like there's people in my life, like I said before, that were there to lift me up when I needed encouragement, there to pull me back when maybe I needed a guardrail. And I think that's so important. And I think any successful person has that. They have, Jesus had his tribe, right? He has 12 people. And I think most of us have at least 2, 3, 4 really good, close friends that we can confide in. So that's number one with that, just from like a people standpoint. And then number 2, realizing, I think a lot of times when we go through something really, really hard, whether that's financial or relational or physical, sometimes it's spiritual. Sometimes we're wrestling with like, what do we believe? What are we here for? What's my purpose? And what I've realized is, for a long time, I thought, like, God, did I do something wrong that I'm not healed? Or you didn't, like, why am I in this chair? What's the purpose behind this? Why do I need the, and as an athlete, I'm like, maybe I can, work if I work hard, if I will it, if I pray the right way. And looking back, I realized that the miracle already happened. The miracle was the spiritual transformation that took place. And then realizing that this wheelchair is a miracle. This wheelchair provided, God provided this wheelchair, and I got to play a sport for Team USA and travel the world. This wheelchair provided an opportunity for my wife and I to go through something that was transformational and become married. And so marrying just an amazing woman, this wheelchair provided that marriage. So then our kids, you go back and see it all trickle through. Sometimes we're looking on the outside for the miracle when the miracle's on the inside. God's already given it to us. And so I think it's important to kind of see, okay, what's around us? What resources do we have? What talents, gifts, desires did he give us? Now we step out in obedience and do it. And so I think a lot of times we're just looking elsewhere when the miracle's already there.
Yeah. And it reminds me of that verse in Genesis 50:20 that when Joseph is in Egypt, he says basically like what the enemy meant for harm, like God intended and turned it for good.
Yeah.
And so it reminds me of that, of like the enemy may have meant for that accident to wreck you and turn you away from God, but like God used it for good. And like you're getting to tell your story now and change so many lives. And who knows what, it's sometimes we look back at hard moments. We're like, I wonder what my life would have been like if this had never happened. But like, look where you are now. And I think that's so cool that God has been able to use you and your story and just all the transformation that's happened through that. So I think that's so awesome. And speaking of your kids, I would love just to hear too, just about parenting with encouraging your kids to like being from your perspective now of what you've walked through in life and how that's affected how you teach your kids about their identity in Christ and and what encouragement you'd give to other parents raising their kids to know their identity in Christ as well. Because I feel like sometimes as kids, like we go through so many phases when we're younger of, like we talked about earlier of, I want to be an astronaut. I want to be this. I want to be all these things. And then, I've had friends too, who in high school, they've had different things that, they thought they were going to be this, and then something happened and now they're on this route and they were so confused. So I'd love just your parenting perspective on that as well for raising kids.
Yeah. Wow. I think a lot of us as parents can be hard on ourselves, whether, depending on how you were raised, or if there was a single parent or whatever it is, like whatever your journey was. A lot of times we're like, we want to do it differently, or we want to do it better, or we want to do it here. And a lot of times there's some insecurities and inadequacy stuff that starts to pop up. But really, like, the two things our kids need is they need love and they need presence. Not like Christmas time, but like we need to be present in our kids' lives. A lot of times I think people want to go and be successful, whatever, and get all the money and get all the materialistic things and whatnot. But like, first and foremost, is your home built on a solid foundation, like relational inside your phone four walls? Is it solid? And there's times where I've done a great job of it. There's times I was just talking to my wife today. I'm like, I need to make sure I go on dates with the kids here before my next training camp, because I need to make sure I'm putting in the effort there, because if my relationship with my wife's not good and my relationship with my kids aren't good, it doesn't matter what I do outside the home. Doesn't matter if I go and speak in front of 10,000 people. If I don't have that foundation that's rock solid, then slowly it's going to falter. There's going to be some problems there. And I think a lot of times we go, yeah, we got a good foundation. We got a good foundation. And our house isn't built on sand. We're good to go, right? But a lot of times I hear, well, my marriage is pretty good. Well, my relationship with my kids is, it's good, whatever. But how about on fire, rock solid, in love with your kids and your spouse, and looking for little cracks? Like, we do home improvement stuff all the time physically with our homes, or keeping up with the Joneses or whatnot. But like, let's go rock solid and find those cracks and do that TLC within our relationships. And so for me, for a long time, my oldest is 9 years old. And for a long time I thought, man, is he going to love me if I can't throw the ball far enough or whatnot? But no, like, my kids just want to be loved and to be heard, and for me to be present and having real conversations. So that'd be my tips. I think that's so important too, because I think that's where it starts. Like you said, it's that foundation. And I think if they grow up with that foundation, then it helps direct the rest of their life. Because I think oftentimes we view our relationship with God through our real life relationships too, through parents, through other relationships in our lives. So I think that if our parents can help show us that love, then we can understand God's love better too. So I love that. And something you mentioned earlier too is kind of that victim mindset. And I'd love to hear just some thoughts around that too, of how we can make sure when we go through these hard things that we don't just sit there with our arms crossed and be like, well, this happened to me and I can't do anything about it. But instead, like, having that victory mindset of like, I can choose to make this work. Yeah. This is something that I think is huge inside the church, outside of it, with everyone. No matter where you're at and with your faith journey and what you believe, is we get a choice in it. We have personal responsibility to choose, right? And so, I think it's easy to play the blame game. It's easy to play the victim card. And well, I was raised poor, or I went to the wrong school, or it's this person's fault. This relationship completely ruined me, or for me, I could have blamed Kyle. Like, Kyle's driving the boat. It wasn't me driving the boat. So like this whole hand that I was dealt isn't my fault. So whatever. Or you can choose to be a victor. You can choose to take personal responsibility in your reaction. So like, we don't choose a circumstance, but we choose the reaction to it. And when we realize that, it becomes empowering, especially as a believer, because right away, the first thing we can say is, I am a child of God. Like, that's powerful when you say, I'm a child of God. All of a sudden, your chest starts puffing up, like you get a little pumped up here. Like, let's go,
Yeah.
And from there, and then you go, okay, what's next? Well, God has a plan for me. So now I'm a child of God. God's got a plan. And all of a sudden, like, some of this stuff where I'm pouting before is like, no, wait a second, I can step in obedience. So for me right away, it was like, all right, this is my life right now in the wheelchair. So I got to figure out how to transfer from the bed into the wheelchair. Before I got to do that, I got to figure out how to dress myself. I got to do that, learn how to feed myself, learn how to transfer into a car so I can drive. And like, it starts to become little steps that gain momentum, because you're stepping in obedience at what God called you to do, and your purpose in that. And so I think it's this dichotomy. Are you going to play the blame game and be a victim? Or are you going to play the victor card and have a victor mindset and going, you know what, I can choose my reaction to my circumstances?
Yeah, I think that's huge too, because honestly, the only thing we can control in life is ourselves. We can't control what other people do or how other people react. And so I think that that's huge to make that choice and everything. And to remember, like, it didn't catch God off guard that XYZ happened in our lives or whatever. Like, it's not going to throw off his plan for our life just because we had to pivot, or because, like, God still uses it all for good. And like, he's still going to accomplish whatever he put us here to accomplish. Like, he's still going to do that. So I think that that's a good way to think about it. And one of the questions I love to ask everyone who comes on the show, because the heart of this show is just talking with people who are blazing their own God-given trail and using their stories just to inspire others, because I think there's power in our stories. And so I love to ask people, what's one piece of advice that you would want to leave with the listeners that you've learned along your, like, quote unquote trail in life?
One piece of advice, just one. Oh man. I think it's here's my advice. People let fear overtake their purpose a lot. And what I mean by that is in other words, we think of, oh man, what's God's will? What's God's will? I want to do it. I want to do it. And then when you have things happen and there's doors that open, you're too scared to walk through them, because we're looking at other people and what they're going to think. And we're looking at, what are my friends going to think? What are my family going to think? What happens if I fail? What happens then? And we wrap up all this thinking in the step of obedience becomes like this mountain that you have to jump off, this cliff that you got to jump off. And it's never a leap of faith. It's just a step. It's just a step in the right direction. So step into it. Like, most of us know what we're passionate about. We know what our talents and gifts are. And we kind of realize what our purpose is, but we're scared of failing and we're scared of letting people down. And for me, when I decided full-time to be a speaker, I knew exactly, God had called me to be a speaker when I was 13, and I fought him on it. And he provided some other things for me, and I realized that for 20 years, I was basically training to do what my purpose was. And that's just to share my message, to speak to as many people as I can. It doesn't matter if it's a podcast or if it's 4 people at a youth group or it's 5,000 people. It doesn't matter. Stepping into my purpose there, but it's just stepping. It's just one quick step in obedience. And all of a sudden that's going to snowball in a good way. Don't let fear overtake you. Don't let what other people are going to overtake you. God has a plan for you. God has a purpose for you, and just step into that one step at a time.
Yeah, that's such a good reminder, because I think, like you said, in today's world, we can so easily have that like fear of man more than doing what God's called us to do. So I think that that's so important. Well, switching gears to just kind of last question I love to ask people before we end the show is, I love just to hear what current things people are loving, anything that you're enjoying lately. It could just be like going to the park, or it could be like, a smoothie or something like that. I've heard so many random things from people, but I always think it's so fun.
Oh man. What I'm enjoying, our kids are back into sports. And so seeing them play sports and the joy of watching them run around, even though like they're all in soccer and the younger kids it's just a herd of bees, swarm of bees running around a soccer field. But I absolutely enjoy watching them get to play and do things. And then I would say the other day, I think my parenting life was made. I grew up with the Mighty Ducks, D1, D2, D3, and my kids watched them all over Easter break. And then they were quacking at the neighbors on the trampoline, doing the quack, quack, quack from the Ducks. So that was special. I'm just like, this is fantastic. I've succeeded as a parent. So there you have it.
Yes, I know. I loved the Mighty Ducks when I was younger, and I saw they're doing a remake of Space Jam with LeBron James, and I was like, it still won't top, Michael Jordan, but it looks pretty good. So I'm kind of excited for that. I'm all about some nostalgia.
Totally.
Well, is there anything that you want to make sure that you tell our listeners about today, or make sure we talk about our cover before we wrap up? And also, how can people connect with you?
Yeah. Let me finish with this. The Lord gave me athletic mindset, and in athletics, when we're playing games, we want to win. We want to win. And sometimes the scoreboard shows us that we don't, that quote unquote, we failed or we lost. And I never realized this until a while ago, but what I want to share is that we always have an opportunity to have permanent victory. I talked about being 13 when the Lord gave me the idea to be a speaker, and I thought he was crazy. And 6 years later, I break my neck and then going through this whole thing. But he gave me the gift of threes. 13, when I thought I was going to be a speaker, 33 when I actually stepped into being a speaker, a 3% chance to walk when the doctors told me, which didn't happen, but that 3% ended up turning into 3 beautiful kids, ended up turning into 3 times I've been training for the Paralympics with 3 letters on my chest, USA. And that all means to me, and stepping into being a speaker now means that he's given me permanent victory because of whose I am. It doesn't matter what the scoreboard says. It doesn't matter how many medals I have. It doesn't matter what else I do in this world that they call success. If I'm a child of God, I have permanent victory because of what he did on the cross. And so just want to leave you with that. If you guys want to reach out, www.joedelagrave.com is the easiest place, or find me on Instagram at jdelagrave14. Thank you so much, Courtney, for having me on.
Yeah, thank you so much for being on. I know this conversation is going to help so many people and just bless them. So I appreciate you coming on today.
Absolutely.
Wasn't that conversation just so inspiring? I hope that you learned something and that you were encouraged, and that it can meet you right where you are as well. Make sure that you're following Joe so that you can keep up with his journey as they go to Tokyo to compete in the Paralympics this year. And if you haven't yet, make sure you're subscribed to the podcast wherever you listen. And if you don't mind, we would love for you to leave us a review. And if there's any specific topics you would love to hear about, or any specific guests, you can always email us at hello@thetrailblazerjournals.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you here next week.